guys, welcome to the Radiate Your Faith podcast. My name is Matie and I'm a college softball player from the great state of Texas. And I'm so excited that you are tuning into the Radiate Your Faith podcast, where I hope you are encouraged to let the light of Christ shine through you in a way that allows people to see God through the way that you walk with Him. My prayer for you is that your faith is deepened, that it is strengthened, and that you are encouraged to radiate your faith. Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Radiate Your Faith. This is episode 3, and I am super excited about the conversation we're going to be having today about doubt. And the person that I have on is a brand new friend to me. He's all the way in Oregon, so that's why we're doing this over FaceTime. But I'm super excited for this conversation, and I'm just going to let him introduce himself to you guys.
Hi, my name's Ethan. I had the great pleasure of meeting Matie at my school Baylor's, one of their events called FM 72. Basically, it was just 4 nights over 72 hours where they just got everyone down on Fountain Mall, worshipped, listened to some just teachings, and were just emboldened by the Spirit to just go forth and just be more passionate about God. And one of my friends, Ainsley from high school, goes to Matie's school and is one of her dear friends. And so we were just texting. I invited her to come out. She brought Matie. We had a great time. We talked afterward till way too late. That was a rough morning, but it was so worth it. Great blessing. And just, I've really enjoyed getting to know Matie this far. And I'm just grateful that you guys get to see a little bit more of her through this podcast.
Yeah, no, when we first met, Ainsley was like, we should go to this, it was like a worship event at Baylor. And I met Ethan there, and we ended up going into this, was it a prayer tent? Is that kind of what yeah. And we sat and talked for probably, I don't know, 2 hours, something like that. And then we went back outside, and then we sat and talked more outside till we had to leave because I think we had school or something next day. But yes, me and Ethan are recent friends. We met not even like 3 months ago, but from the day I met him, I knew I wanted to have a conversation with him on my podcast because he's such a knowledgeable guy, and I'm just very impressed by his knowledge. So I think this is going to be a great conversation, and I'm very excited to have you on. So, like I said, today we're going to be talking about doubt, and I would just like you to kind of talk about why this is what you decided to be our topic for today.
Right. So when I think about doubt, the thing that comes to my mind is the thing that's been more present in my life than just a total absence of belief in God. When I just think about all my friends that I see that are just far from God, it's not that they don't believe in God, or it's not that God is foreign to them, or they've never heard about Jesus. It's just that He isn't real to them. Like, it's not something that makes a difference or matters in their life. Like, the Spirit just hasn't moved. And there's been a lot of people that I've just talked to that I've been praying for, that if we just talk about God, or like they can talk about Him, like they're fluent, they're well versed, but He's just not in their hearts. He's only in their minds. And that's been something that I'd say that for the greater part of my life, that's how God has been to me. He's just been in my mind, but not in my heart. And there's so many of my friends that I just see in this predicament, just Jesus stuck in the mind, but just not in their hearts. And so I just wanted to put some thoughts into words and just talk about it. And hopefully someone hearing this hears it, and God speaks to them to go talk to someone, or just find God in a new way, search for Him, or maybe talk to one of their friends who probably is in a similar situation, just radiate their faith.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that you dropped that in there. Yeah, and I mean that's even a part of my testimony is I went to church for a long time, and I knew God in my head, but he didn't feel real to me. Like, I believed in Him, but it was like, oh, He's so far off, distant, like He's not somebody I can have a relationship with. And I feel like a lot of people in the church feel that way, and this is kind of a wake-up call to really just pursue God in a way that He wants us to. And I read this recently. It says that, for a lot of us as humans, we have this desire in our heart to be in relationship. And that's actually a reflection of God's own heart, for His desire to want us to be in a relationship with us, which I think is such a cool thing. So I'm so excited to be talking about this. This is going to be so good. So let's just kind of go into this. Can you tell me the story of how doubt entered the picture for you at the beginning of your walk with God?
Right. So I like you, I grew up in Portland, lived here my whole life. Faith, it's here. There's lots of churches, but it's very much not a culture where people like live out their faith. Like I always remember feeling like church was. I didn't have a great church growing up, not super gospel centered, just kind of doing whatever. But even so, I knew that there was just a sense in which people went to church, and they weren't different people at church. They just weren't the same people that they were just out and about. Like they were good people, but just lives weren't impacted by like the God that they met in church. It was just a different God that they were kind of interacting with that didn't really have any demands on their life, any sort of just impact on them beyond just sitting in the pews and singing hymns and listening to a message. And that's kind of the faith that I grew up in. I was gifted with very faithful parents that loved me, that put me in Christian school my whole life. And as a result, kind of the curse of that is that I grew up with uh, the Bible just being another subject that I learned. It was something that I did to pass a class, just learning about all the stories of the Old Testament, like all the people that have gone before and just learning about them. And it was a grade to pass a class. Like it wasn't a real, true experience with God. I didn't really connect with it at all because it was just a game to me. Like versus the Bible was something that I memorized to make my grandparents happy and win prizes at youth groups. I was Bible camp. I would just knock down all the verses in like 2 days. And it was kind of like my party trick, you could say. It was that I was like really good at like knowing all the things, doing the Bible trivia, memorizing the verses, but it just didn't stick with me. Whenever I was at camp, I always just had this feeling like everyone else. It wasn't it wasn't everyone else, but I had this feeling that everyone else had this like connection with God that I just didn't have, even though I knew more about him than them, which is kind of the way that I think about how my doubt like affected my life, is that I knew all this stuff about him and yet knew less about him than everyone else that I saw that had a relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so going forward into just first half of high school, kind of where this landed was there was a point in time I remember I like to watch comedy a lot. It was kind of a little pet project of mine, was just learning comedy and stuff like that. So I was watching this comedian and he was like kind of doing a rant or whatever about like the inconsistencies or irrationalities or whatever that he found in religion, like Christianity specifically. And he was a comedian, like it was a funny bit, but like it shook me because I didn't have any way to respond to what he was saying. Like God was like a part of my life to the extent that like a soccer team was a part of my life. And I was still possessive of him as I would be if I got kicked off a soccer team. Like it was still mine. It just wasn't real. And my inability to like answer this atheist comedian's jokes was something that like it really rocked me. And I remember stepping out into the hall, thinking, as I had at other times, just sitting in a car or whatever, that I just didn't, there wasn't really a reason that I even believed in God. There was just not really something that drove me to him. There was no passion. There was no purpose in my faith. There was no power. There wasn't any really enjoyment other than the enjoyment I got from other people through praise of my Bible skills or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think I reached a point a couple of times where I was like, there really is no reason that I do believe in God. But by his grace, I came to the conclusion that there wasn't any reason why I shouldn't. And it was just inertia that kept me going and not just rejecting the faith entirely.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what doubt looked like for me for most of my life. It was just God being just on the sidelines, not really in my life, not present, not someone that I talked to, not someone whose company I really wanted, or just not, I didn't know that there was anything more that you could have from God than just kind of a good grade, a good life, good, all the things.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people like don't realize that there is a difference between you can know all of the stories of the Bible and not know God. And that was something that I never, realized as a young kid was God isn't this thing that's so far off that's unavailable to you if you make a mistake or if you feel like you're not good enough for him. Like he's somebody who wants a relationship with you that you can know personally. And I think that's a part of why it's so important that when you're, looking for a church to be attending, you don't need to be going somewhere where they make God feel like he's not real. Like in a sense, like they talk about him, yeah, but they make him seem so far off that he's like unreachable as a person who wants a relationship with them. So wow, yeah. So where in your story do you feel like God started to actually become more real for you?
Right. I think that after there were glimpses sophomore year of high school, but I think moving forward into junior year, especially, there was just a lot that God did in my life that kind of made me more aware of him, like a real like sense that he was powerful, that he cared about me and was actually interested in who I was. And it wasn't really about me looking for him, it was about him looking for me,
Mm,
which is something that looking back is very touching, and that it wasn't something that he was far off and I was searching for him. It was something where but I was always far off and he gathered me from the ends of the earth and just came to me. And the way that that happened was through just growing as a person. There was retreats that we went on that it was I encountered just a love through my friends that was very clearly not just a human type of love. There was something in it that was just far beyond what I knew in my own life just was possible. There was just something deeper, something truer about it. And so I just fell in love with this kind of love that just cares so deeply about people, knows and loves them intimately. And so I just go back and back for all these retreats, and I just kept going back to it. And it was something that it did drive me to like change my life and live differently, in a way that religion never had. The way I just went back to school and I was just intent on loving people, but my heart wasn't in it to love them. My heart was more to get love back, to get back to the feeling, to get back to just the sense that I had that God was there, that it just wasn't the same just in everyday life. And so although I was just trying to like really love people, it was still about me. It was still about, are they going to like me back? Is it going to be taken wrong? Are all these things just considerations that have to be figured out before I make the decision to actually just love someone? And so it was showing me, God was showing me that. He was showing me that he was real, that he was present, he cared about me through my friends. But it was like a stained glass window, and I saw the sun through the stained glass window, but I was too focused on the stained glass window to actually consider that there could be a sun and that it doesn't just light up on its own. That's not how it works. But this thing that I was looking for that came through my friends was really from God. And so I fell in love more with the gifts than the giver, the creations over the creator. And I think when I really started to figure that out was when I came to Baylor. Looking back, just I can see like all the providence that brought me to this place and this place that I love, and I'm so grateful that I am at.
all the way from Oregon. How far
Yeah,
of
there's
how far away is it in like hours?
flight. It's like 4 to 5 hours depending on which way you're going. So it's like two movies and a couple shows.
Oh, so far.
Yeah, well, depends on what's out, but yeah, I have friends that have like made the drive out, and it's crazy. I could never drive out.
No, I couldn't either.
That's too much. Um, yeah, but just going to Baylor, just checking out churches, I was more or less just going with my friends. I still wanted to go to church, like that was still going to be part of my life, but um, I didn't really have like really high expectations for it. And we went to a service at 7 o'clock, like the first Sunday, and I listened to a sermon. I forget exactly what it was about, and I know that I watched it again like a couple months ago, and it wasn't like a spectacular sermon. There was nothing like super cool or powerful about it. It was just God just touched my heart and just showed me that he cared, and that who he was not who I thought he was. And even though I knew so much about him in my head, because I hadn't really taken the time to learn about who he actually was as a person and about his heart, that I really didn't know him at all. And I got a kind of a first glimpse of him just after that sermon, and was just kind of struck by it. And I kept going back, and kept just being drawn toward it and just growing in it, learning to just seek him and spend time in his word and pray and go to life group and just doing all these things that wasn't about just doing them. It was about doing them because I wanted to, and because I thought that that was what would bring me closer to God out of obedience, and just was how I was just going to love him back because of who he is and what he's done. and not because of what it got me or because it was just something I did to win praise. And so growing in that has just, that's been kind of how he's entered my life, was that he saw me when I was far out, and he came to me and he showed me who he really was. And that was what just drew me to him. It changed my perspective on him. It changed how I approached him, how I thought about him. And so the realness that I saw it, the sense that God can't be any more than just an intellectual kind of trivia fact, uh, that just, it just fell away when I actually saw the real thing.
Yeah, wow. That is powerful. I mean, I think for a lot of people, especially me growing up, I remember going to Sunday school and, hearing the stories. I'd be like, yeah, like I believe in God, whatever. And we also did like Bible trivia, and I'd be like, okay, I kind of know like some of the stories, but it almost felt like God was this like concept rather than this reality that was tangible. And I think even when you were talking about God's heart after you, I remember whenever I did encounter God and I did, get to see his heart for the first time, when it wasn't just a head knowledge thing, it was a heart knowledge thing. Um, his love, like which what you talked about, that was what captivated me. Like the love he has for us is so unlike what the world has to offer. And it's such a beautiful thing. And I feel like when you do get to experience the realness of his love, there is no turning back. Because for me, I feel like everybody has doubts in regards to their faith. There'll be times where I'm like, is this really like a thing? Like I'm like, what? And but then I look back on all those moments where things have been so God written, and you can see his love written all over it because it is so unlike anything you'd ever see just in the world. Like it's so different. And I love his heart for us. And I feel so heartbroken for the people who don't get to experience that. Like it is such a gift. It is such a good thing. And I think that's part of why like sharing the gospel with people is so important to me. And I think it's the most loving thing you can do, is because everybody deserves to be loved that way. And I think the media culture likes to twist it to this thing that's like people are trying to shove it down your throats, and it's like, no, we want you to experience the love and the freedom that comes with walking with Jesus. It's such a beautiful thing. And so I guess my question for you is what would you tell the person who is struggling to believe that God is real?
Right. I think I would just tell that person that even if it feels like God isn't there, he is, and that you just do your, like, just believe in him, just look. And if you can't bring yourself to believe, like, that's okay. Just don't stay there. If you want to know him, if you want to experience him, you've got to keep looking. And it's not going to be a looking that's just like flipping through a Bible that you found in like some hotel a couple times. It's
Yeah, and
going
like
to,
hoping some random page will open and it's like, I remember
yeah,
doing when I was
yeah,
little. I'd be like, oh, maybe you'll speak to me through this one random page that I open.
yeah. Funny. Yeah, but searching for God, it's not like any other search that you do. Like you can't, it's not just something you do on the side. It's got to be like something where you're not holding back yourself.
Mm,
Um, if you're searching for God, I think that you're doing it wrong if you're thinking that because I'm doing this, God owes me this.
mm,
And that's something that more recently, past couple months, has been something that as I've been trying to grow in the faith, that's kind of been on my mind, is that do I think that God owes me more of his presence and just more of him because I'm doing this, or am I doing this because I love him and that's just the primary motivation? So I think that if we think of it, if we think of it as just like a cause effect type of thing, where we want to know God, but we also want everything else that we can choose, desire, and have from the world, then we're not really searching after God with our whole heart. And that's what he wants, is our heart. And so just giving of your heart, giving of yourself, that's what honors God. And that's what is going to draw you closer to him, is just giving of yourself, just loving him and just seeing who he is. And I think that doing this in community is absolutely essential. I don't think that just doing this on your bed at night before you go to bed is going to be as fruitful as like finding a church and just being discipled and looking for people that have been doing it longer and have just been experiencing God more than you, and just talking to them, learning about them from their experiences, and just seeing how God's worked through their lives, and just receiving like knowledge and wisdom that they've gleaned from the scriptures just will help it come alive much more than if you just read it with a little background or understanding.
Right.
And yeah, just think it's all about your heart. I don't think that you need to read a certain number of pages or know a certain amount of things. I just think it's all about your heart. And I think that's what was missing for me all those years, is that just God didn't have my heart. And I always had his, but I just didn't know it. I didn't see it because he didn't have mine, and that wasn't what I was looking to.
Right. And I think what I when we talked about this conversation, the first verse that popped into my head was Matthew 7:7. And it says, "Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you." And I think if wanting to know God in that personal way is something you desire and you haven't experienced that, keep knocking on the door. Like Ethan said, for some people it's not going to be instantaneous. Like it's not going to be a cause and effect. Like you said, you're going to have to keep seeking him and giving him your heart. And even in Jeremiah chapter 29, it says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart." And I think for a lot of us, whenever we talk about God, we're not actually seeking him with our heart at all. Like it's more of like okay, like I'll hear about him on a Sunday and like I'll pray here and there when I need to, but we're not actively seeking him. We're not actively desiring to build a relationship with him. And then in regards to reading the Bible, I think I've even talked to Ainsley about this, our mutual friend. Whenever she accepted Christ, I mean, she'd read the Bible for years and years because she had gone to a Catholic school with you, right? Or yeah, which that's a whole nother conversation. We'll have to probably do another podcast on that. But she'd read the Bible many, many times before. And until she accepted Christ, she said she never understood what she was reading. And whenever she did, and she was actively seeking after God's heart, she said that's when she was able to understand the Bible. She was able to read because, the Holy Spirit helps you understand. And that's, a part of the gift of whenever you accept Christ is the Holy Spirit. And even in my own life, I mean, I remember growing up and hearing the stories, reading the Bible, but I mean, I wouldn't know how to read it because I didn't really know God. And so, my encouragement to you guys who don't know the Lord and you desire to seek that out is keep knocking. Keep knocking, be patient. God is a lot bigger than your doubts, and he can work through whatever you're struggling with in regards to your belief. And I mean, there God is so cool. He will do at least in my life, he's done so many things to where it's like it's gotten to the point now where I've seen him work so much that it's really hard for me to doubt. Like I remember this past softball season, we did not have a good start to the year at all. It was a hot mess. And I remember praying and asking God for him to redeem the year. And that is exactly what he did time and time again. He was just writing out the story of the rest of our season. And it's moments like that where it's like God is so undeniably real that I don't really doubt anymore, but I did. And that is such a normal thing. Don't ever feel like doubting is not okay. Like that's just a part of how it is. I mean, I still occasionally, be like, "Oh, I don't know." But God is a lot bigger than your doubts, and he's going to love you regardless of what you're struggling with. He wants that. Like if you're feeling that, go to him and talk to him about it because he wants to hear that. So do you have something you want to say?
I just thinking about this quote that I think I heard somewhere, but it was just that doubting is okay and like it's healthy and natural, but it's not a place where you're supposed to stay. Like
Right.
part of being human is like believing things, not disbelieving things. If you like forming your worldview and opinions on disbelief, isn't how it's not how this thing works. And so if you just have doubts, if you feel like you can't believe, that's okay, but it's not a place where you ought to stay. There was a book I read. It was called The Atheist That Didn't Exist by Andy Bannister, I think. And the whole thought behind it was that if you're going to be an atheist, like so be it, but don't be one that's not well considered. Don't be one that just falls for like all these like pop internet kind of quirky arguments that are more about personality and edginess than actual any thought to it, which I think is what a lot of people um, need is just more actual heart knowledge that's informing not emotions, not feeling like, oh well, I believe in God because just some camp high or something like that, although we can work through that. But like the basis should be like your heart informing your mind. And so you're thinking with your chest, not just blind intellect, not just blind feelings, but just using your chest to think and just develop just your thinking and how you approach the world, which is going to include doubt at times. It's going to include at times lots of doubt. But as you move through it, as you just develop like your capacity to think with your chest more, it's gonna you're gonna move through doubts, and as you move through doubts, you'll be more comfortable encountering doubts in the future because you know how it works. I remember I think this was like first semester, like in contrast to when I saw this like atheist comedian, I just couldn't answer him. There's a thing where I was looking at like atheist arguments. I was like, what's the best ones I can find? And there was one I forget what it was, but it totally stumped me. Like I couldn't figure out how to get around it. But I just figured that God had already like kind of solved so many of them for me. I was content to just say, God, this is like you throw me like a fun little crossword. Like this is just kind of a way that I can like solve this, think about this, and just honor you through how I like think about it and pursue it. And it doesn't have to be like an existential crisis because I don't know. It can just be kind of like a fun little challenge that I have because I know that my faith doesn't ultimately rest on knowing all the best arguments or knowing all the things. It like rests on who he is and my knowledge of who he is and what he's done.
I was just going to ask this. How do you think that doubt has impacted how you even view yourself?
I think that having God like truly in your life impacts how you see yourself in so many ways. Shapes how you love, your humility, how you approach others, how you approach like, your job, your money, relationships, just everything in your life becomes informed by God when he becomes real to you. And when that wasn't true for me, it was just very easy for me to just consider my identity based on who I was friends with, what teams I was on, how good I was, what clubs I did, my abilities, my talents, all these things were just kind of they meant more to me than they should have. It wasn't if you took one of them away, like if I wasn't able to like do cross country or didn't make the mock trial team I wanted, like it wouldn't have ruined me, but it would have just like kind of kicked a peg out from under me and I would have kind of like walked around crippled, so to speak, for a bit. As much as that metaphor makes very little sense to me. Um, but yeah, it's just when God wasn't real, everything else had to be so much more real. And so that were so small because it's all under the sun, nothing truly matters that's not of God. They became so much bigger and they were so much real. Like the test that was coming up wasn't just an opportunity for me to just demonstrate all the studying that I'd done and how I can just honor God through my abilities, but it became like a measure of my value and worth because it measured my gifts and who I was. It mattered so much more because it was so much more real because God wasn't as real. And so as he's become more and more real to me, things that like would have been much more hurtful or things that would have much more knocked me off course become a lot less so. Like friends that like leave or go away, like it's bad, like it hurts, but it's just not the end of the day because you know that God has already set all the friends that you're going to have in your life ahead of you, and he knows exactly which ones are going to be good for you. He knows exactly which ones are going to matter, are going to shape you, are going to change you.
Yep, and he's the
And
only thing that doesn't change too. Like he's never
yeah,
gonna love you like anyone else would. Like he's someone you can rely on all the time.
yeah, absolutely. Like it's just he's so much better of a basis for just knowledge about yourself than anything else. Like if you're looking at yourself through a mirror of just activities, people, or ideas or whatnot, you're not going to see yourself as clear as if you look into like the heart of God and how you were truly made, how you were made to be, how he wants to use you and shape you and mold you. You're going to see much more of who you are. And I think that that was kind of like when I saw Ainsley again, that was when like after she became a Christian, like that was what kind of struck me was how it wasn't like she was a whole new person. Like we talk about like I think evangelical Texans, it's a lot of like being born again, like a whole new person. Like they put a lot of emphasis on like transformation through baptism and regeneration. But it wasn't when I saw Ainsley, it wasn't as if she was a whole new person. It was just she was so much more her. Everything about her just made more sense as who she was because she was much more of who God made her to be. I think that's more of like how that external view of someone else has grown to be how I view myself internally, is someone that God made to be a certain way. And when I pretend like that, or when it just becomes less clear to me that that's true, it becomes a lot foggier who I actually am. And that affects just all things about my life. Um, so yeah, looking to God as the means to see yourself is how you're going to see who you actually are. And that's something that I think I've grown to appreciate more and more over the last couple months and last year.
Yep. And just to clarify for those of you listening or watching, Ainsley is one of my teammates from McLennan back when I played there, because we haven't really talked about her too much, but I had the opportunity of getting to walk with her, walk her to Christ, and she is just the best. Hi, Ainsley, if you're watching this. She's gonna be on here soon, which I'm super excited to have her on. But she, did this past year accept Christ, got baptized, and we have gotten to see a really cool transformation in her. And I would agree with Ethan with the fact that, when you do accept Christ and you go through a transformation, it's not like you're Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana, like that kind of transformation. It's more like you kind of just start to radiate, like you start to glow, that Jesus glow. I always talk about the Jesus glow. But I think that's just because, whenever you do get to be in God's presence, like talks about, like with Moses in Exodus, he literally glue while spending, time with Jesus. And I think there's a freeing thing about knowing God and having a relationship with him, because you start to have confidence not only in him but in who he created you to be. And that is such a freeing thing. So well, my camera is about to die, so this is probably going to be the end of the podcast, but I am super excited that you guys have tuned in. Or if you're watching on YouTube, I'm so glad you've joined us. I'm so grateful to be continuing to do this podcast. It's been so cool to see what God's done through it. If any of you guys want to check out any more of our Radiate Your Faith stuff, we do have a website, www.radiateyourfaith.com. If you want to buy some merch, you can rep the brand. We got some t-shirts on there, but I'm, again, so excited that you're joining us. And thank you, Ethan, for being on the podcast.
Lovely to be here. I'm so blessed to be a part of this, to have you as a friend, and just have the opportunity to just think about these things, talk about them more. And yeah, best of luck on this new adventure.
Oh, thanks, Ethan. All right, guys, talk to you later. Hope you guys are encouraged to radiate your faith.